Aloha mai kako, and welcome to Ola Ka Hāloa. In 1978, the Native Hawaiian delegation of the State Constitutional Convention pushed for a simple but revolutionary idea that Native Hawaiians should control their own resources. The delegates argued that Native Hawaiians understood the needs of their own the best and would be able to best direct their own resources to meet those needs. This idea resonated with Hawaii residents, who eventually voted to approve amending the state constitution to establish the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. The purpose of this panel today is to better understand how OHA is meeting its legal mandate to better the conditions of Native Hawaiians, more than 4 decades since its creation. Today, we have joining us OHA Kapohana Sylvia Hussey, OHA Public Relations Officer Sterling Wong, and OHA's Grant Manager Maile Lu'uvai. Aloha mai kako! Hey, how are you guys doing, my fellow OHA Ohana here today, joining us on Ola Ka Hāloa? Can you introduce yourself and where you're from?
Aloha, my name is Sterling Wong. I'm the Public Relations Officer here at OHA. Originally born and raised in Kunia, I now live in Wahiawa. I like to call it God's country, Wahiawa Heights.
I actually refer to Wahiawa because Kukani Loko is there, and my ohana traces back to that aina as the center of the universe. So you can go ahead, if you want to, go ahead and borrow that. But I'm gonna ask the Wahine here where they're from, and we might have shifting centers of the universe as we go through everyone. Yeah, and joining us also is Maile. Maile, can you introduce yourself and tell us where you're from?
Aloha, I'm Maile Lu'uai. I'm originally from Evo Beach, Oahu, close to Haubush. And right now I live in Panaeva Hawaiian Homestead on Hawaii Island.
Awesome. Mahalo nui. And then now, Kapohana, the CEO of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Aloha, Dr. Hussey. How are you doing? And where are you coming in from?
From my center of the universe, I'm born and raised in Kohala on Hawaii Island, particularly in Nuli'i, where our family home is there. And if anyone is familiar there, it's the crossroads between going to Keokea Beach Park or up to Pololu Valley. And our family home is right in the middle of that. So born and raised there, now called Kaneohe on Oahu home, but always refer to Kohala as my center of the universe. So while I appreciate Sterling's center of the universe, my center of the universe is Kohala.
Mahalo. Mahalo nui loa, all of you guys for joining me today. And we wanted to really bring the Ola Ka Hāloa audience a really good kind of synopsis, in a moment in the life of OHA. Tell us, what does OHA do?
So, like anything with Hawaiians, before you say what you do, you always go back to who you. So I think about OHA, who is OHA from its inception? Who is OHA as a state agency that was created by the Constitutional Convention? But who is OHA and who is our Ohana? So the strategic plan talks about our focus on Ohana, Mo'omihiu, and Aina. And before the strategic plan, we have a mandate in Chapter 10 that talks about our primary purposes are to better the conditions of Native Hawaiians, to perform, develop, and coordinate programs and activities for Hawaiians, as well as to assess policy and practice of other agencies as it relates to Hawaiians. So our first mandate of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs comes from Chapter 10 and the state agency. But more importantly, our mission is about elevating the lahui. So when we think about policy, when we think about practice, we think about beneficiaries and the longevity of our lahui, and we think about in terms of generations. So is our lahui better? Are we advancing and thriving as a lahui? And so while we do have a mandate in Chapter 10, we also have a much larger mission about bettering the lahui and having a way to thrive and to be abundant. So I think about what we do. Yes, we have our mission and mandate, but we also have a betterment in terms of, is our ohana mo'omehiu and our aina better because of the work, not just only the work of OHA, but of all other agencies and people who want to uplift our lahui. So it's a very large and broad mandate. It's not just one singular topic as it relates to education, health, housing, economic. It really is about ohana well-being. Is our lahui well? And how do we measure all of that? And how do we know that we're stronger because of that? So that broad mission makes our work very meaningful, but also very long-term. So when we look at our initiatives, we look at our programming, we look at our advocacy, our research, we're really looking long-term as well as short-term, but mostly long-term. And so sometimes the fruits of our labors, the fruits of our advocacy and research are not really seen immediately because our eye is really toward the lahui, a generation. So you're talking about 25 years, roughly, when we look back at the work. But we have such a strong foundation that I am so pleased and honored to be able to operationalize the insights and the guidance and the policy pieces of our trustees as we move OHA forward.
Right, and so that's a good answer to the who, right? And it's so funny because I heard a little kohala tita come out in you, and just a little bit in that one. I could so imagine you doing that. Who you?
Well, and that's just normal, right? You go to any party or
Right.
you're not identified as your name per se, but it's like,
Right.
who's you, baby?
Right.
Who's your auntie or who's your, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's how the connection is made. So I think OHA is similarly as an organization. Who are you, OHA? Who are you, to come to our community? What is your role? And that's an important context when we do our work.
That's a great transition, because the next question I want to ask you is how do we do that, right? So we have this incredible mission, right? This very kind of guiding foundation, right? That we operate off of. But what is OHA? Yeah, I mean, like, what are we made up of?
So looking at our mission and mandate, we have a number of roles that we fulfill. So first and foremost is our advocacy role. And advocacy, from anything to policy, procedure, to square building advocacy, to county advocacy. So advocacy takes many, many forms. Where most, our strength is certainly in legislature, at the legislature, but we also have a Washington, D.C. office that provides significant federal advocacy with other Native indigenous peoples, as well as our county level with iwi kupuna, land, water, and other kinds of ohana community pieces. So advocacy, while it is very broad, it's also very specific as it relates to policy development and policy implementation. Another point that OHA provides is research, data, as well as the insights. OHA has in the past issued men's health report, women's health report, and those reports that help give data and insights into policymakers on how we can better our lahui. And it's not just one segment. Our ohana well-being is really all about a facet of our work and our ohana. So our research piece of our OHA work is extremely important in providing data, not only for our work, but for others to utilize to advance their work. A third portion of our work is also with community engagement. Everything from voter, helping our lahui elevate our voter presence, having the choices and making sure that our lahui has those choices and makes those in an informed manner, whether it's education, health, housing, economic development, anything that helps elevate our lahui in terms of advancing, thriving, and abundance. And abundance in the definitions that we say are abundant, not in future, in other ways. So those kinds of definitions are very important for us to advance. And last but not least is our direct granting. Our current granting is about $9 million a year in direct community grants. And we are in this upcoming budget adding about $2 million. So our granting and our program supports for our communities and beneficiaries are going to be almost $12 million in this next budget cycle. And at least the board just approved $3 million specifically for COVID-19 supports about a month ago to help our communities through emergency financial assistance, as well as community-based food security. So the trustees have been very intentional about the responses that OHA has in our responsibility to our communities and our beneficiaries.
Maile, Kapohana was just kind of talking about our grants program. You know, who are some of our grantees out there that are kind of making a big difference, you know, now and making good impact in our communities?
Well, you know, I decided to we have, even though we have $9 million a year being granted in the community, right now with all our grants in total that's overlayered year to year, we are actually managing $16 million of grants in the community that we invest into organizations to further invest into our Native Hawaiian community. And so I thought, just since I came from Miloli'i this morning, I thought I would take you from Miloli'i here on Hawaii Island all the way to Nanakuli Waianae. So we, among that $60 million in grants, we have a grant to Pa'apono Miloli'i. We are helping them to build their certified kitchen so that community can have a charter school there, and it will be a department, a DHS certified kitchen. We move from Miloli'i to Hana on Maui. On Maui, we have a program with Hana Arts, where we are investing OHA money into the keiki in that community, with an array of cultural programs and arts programs that they probably wouldn't be able to get without the support of OHA. If we move from Hana, where we're gonna go next? Oh, let's go to Waimanalo. With the Waimanalo Health Center, we have a wonderful program with the Waimanalo Health Center, where we have Lomi Lomi for patients there, and we also have La'au Lapa'au programs at Waimanalo. And if we move and transition all the way to West Oahu in the Kapolei, Nanakuli, and Waianae area, we are working with InPeace. And I always have trouble going, it's the Institute for Native Pacific Education and Culture.
Sure.
But we have a really big grant with InPeace where we are doing Native Hawaiian businesses. We're doing an incubator program. We also are doing a teacher preparatory program. And it's basically investing in Hawaiians within their own communities who would be coming back to teach in their own communities, and who are already vested in those communities. So that's some of the many grants that we have. And of course, Sylvia referred to our Kaia'ulu program. Right now we have a COVID program for Kaia'ulu meals, which Mehana, you are responsible for, and it just transitioned to us. So where we're serving meals across the state of Hawaii to our kupuna. I believe we are serving over 2,000 kupuna per week, and we are serving 3,000 per meals, and we are also giving out about 500 community care packages to our kupuna. And I think Sylvia also mentioned our emergency financial assistance program. So if you are Native Hawaiian and you have a job loss or a reduction in hours, you cannot pay your rent, you cannot pay your mortgage, or you need a deposit for rent, or you cannot pay your utilities, we also have a program that serves our Native Hawaiian community through the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement.
I wanted to jump over to Kapohana at this moment and ask if we can talk a little bit more about our efforts with the charter schools.
Sure. The Office of Hawaiian Affairs every 2 years supports $1.5 million a year, and the collective that's been, and Sterling probably can give the cumulative impact of that. Charter schools, we know, are one of the ways that our families can exercise educational sovereignty about how to educate their families in community-based settings in Olelo, Hawaii. So the fact that the Office of Hawaiian Affairs supports charters is a big deal. Charters have been held up as innovation, areas where families or students wouldn't have been interested in school or even gone to school will come to a charter, because charters are community-based and they're there to help their communities be successful. So I'm very much pleased that the office has continued to support charters. In this next round of budgeting, we've actually recognized that for charters, major repairs and maintenance, facilities is a large issue for charters. And so we want to be able to support the learning environment for charters. And in this time of COVID, if there is any education setting that is pivoting and doing well for families, it is charter schools, because they are able to pivot, do family-based. The ohana is a very much a part of the charter experience, and charters are everywhere from Kauai all the way to Hawaii Island. So we are very much pleased that we can continue to support the charters. They're highly innovative in terms of curriculum, instruction, as well as assessments, and really taking the lead on how educational assessment can and look like very different. So I so appreciate that OHA has stepped up and continued for a number of years in supporting our charters very intentionally and visibly.
So we've provided nearly 20 million, probably above 20 million at this point since 2006 to charter schools. And these are, I like to think of it, this is how we're educating our next generation of leaders for our lahui.
Okay, Maile, back to you. If you can just share with us a little bit about how OHA grantees are chosen, or what that process is like.
Well, we have the majority of our funding is competitive grants. So we have a formal grants process where we issue a solicitation, and then nonprofit organizations apply for the funding and go through a, I wouldn't call it a stringent, but a very formal awards process. And so when the applications do come in, we have grant reviewers. The grant reviewers, we do their conflict of interest checks to make sure it's all pono and the process is pono. And the grant reviewers score the applications. And when they complete scoring their applications, then the grants program takes the highest scored applications, and we actually go to the OHA Board of Trustees with the recommendation for award, and then the trustees review those recommendations, and then they provide the final approval and award. So that's our process. I do orientations for all of our grants. So I do it via Zoom. We have grants coming up this summer. I'm actually looking at doing a training program, a grant writing program to help some of our lahui. If they need more information, they should go to grantsinfo@oha.org and send us an email to get on our email list, so they will get the solicitations that we should issue into the community.
The one thing I did want to plug before we get away from grants, is I think when everybody talks about OHA and our grants, everybody talks about charter schools and sort of the culture stuff. But when you look at the polling, I think a lot of people don't realize how much money we invest in housing for our people, housing security for our people, how innovative our housing grants are, and our social, our income grants are. We received an award recently from CNHA for our housing grants. We've invested about $40 million over the last 10 fiscal years into housing security grants. And we have amazing grants that work with our beneficiaries. And we have a grantee that I love, Hawaiian Community Assets. And they have success stories of taking beneficiaries from shelters, from homelessness, into home ownership. And I've worked at OHA forever, and some of the most rewarding things I've ever had to do at OHA, and the real ways that like these stories remind me of why OHA is so important. It's when we meet these beneficiaries who we take from homelessness to home ownership, and we know that our people are marginalized in terms of we have greater economic challenges, but when our people are given that little extra push, through these programs, that a little extra hand-holding, a little extra training, the extra teaching that I think we generally don't get but others get, we can have amazing success stories, and I think that's one of the things I really want to emphasize is that we have like great housing and income programs, and the sad part about it is I think a lot of times people don't realize they're getting these services from OHA,
Right.
because we're not generally a direct service organization. So what I mean by that is we don't provide the services directly. We fund another organization to sort of provide the services for us. So a lot of times these people, our beneficiaries, are getting financial literacy training or home ownership training classes, and they may not realize that OHA is actually supporting these programs. OHA is making these classes happen. So I think that's really important. And that to get back to I think the beginning of this discussion was, what does OHA do? That's like so often a question all of us get, right? And I think that's sort of the disconnect, is that we're not often the ones directly doing the services. We're providing services through somebody else. So they'll see CNHA, on the letterhead, or Hawaiian
Or
Community
ACA,
Yeah, and they don't realize, OHA's behind the scenes providing the funding. So I think that's just an important point I want to make. That OHA is in the community, trying to co-core where we can. And to talk about some of the other stuff that we do, we do a lot of advocacy at the legislature. Sylvia had mentioned it, at the Square building, and that's another thing I think people don't realize. Like, we review like 3,000 bills a year. We provide oral and written testimony on like hundreds of them. We track them throughout session, and so if you're a hula dancer and you got to go out into the kuivis and gather stuff, we're at the legislature trying to protect your rights to make sure you can access and do that. So those are just sort of the small things, not small, I mean those are big things we do, I think, that people don't realize.
Sterling, I wanted to jump in because I wanted to re-emphasize the point that you just made, because I don't think it really clicks, right? Because usually when it comes to the legislative session, our community, or just generally in Hawaii, will focus on a couple of issues, right? Will rise to the surface. They become the popular issues of that session, and then it's always like, okay, how's OHA doing with this one? Right? They don't realize that there are hundreds of other really bad bills, right? Bills that can be very detrimental to our environment, to our people, to our way of life, that need to be watched, right? And equally, there are hundreds of great bills, right, that are submitted by other stakeholder groups who are protecting our natural resources, who are out there and trying to, work towards the betterment, of the people here in Hawaii. And OHA, through its advocacy department, is actually monitoring, across the board. And I think, and Sterling, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we're kind of one of the very few, if the only agencies that does that, right? That really has an eye out for our Native Hawaiian beneficiaries, and are really, doing that type of work to that type of level.
A lot of times on these bills, we're the only ones representing the Native Hawaiian community, and that's our job, so we do it, but a lot of times if we're not in the room, and this speaks to like the importance to, I think, just the existence of OHA and sort of the foresight, those delegates in 1978 had, but having sort of us in the room, being a watchdog, being an advocate for our people, you know. And it's not just on like, I mean, I always bring up the native rights stuff, which I think is easy, but you know, I mean, we have clear needs social and economically where we're in there advocating for, you know, specific, you know, affordable housing stuff. So not just at the legislature, at the county level and permitting and stuff like that, making sure affordable housing is actually affordable and for our people in the areas our people need, you know. And it's actually a nice sort of relationship between the research we do and how that affects our advocacy. I mean, we fund a housing study with the rest of the state housing leaders, and we specifically ask for Native Hawaiian data in there, and we get it. And when we see that data, you know, that, you know, Hawaiians are doubled up in their homes more than other ethnic groups, you know, we have more hidden homeless and things like that, that really affects our advocacy, you know, making sure like developments along the rail line, you know, provide if they're going to get certain, you know, permit exemptions or whatever because they're on the rail line, well, they need to also provide, you know, affordable housing, real affordable housing for our people. And so it's not just about the culture stuff. It's you know, we're at the legislature, we'll do research, but it's the whole gamut. You know, we do kind of everything.
Right.
Hey Tutu, try look this article in Kawai Ola.
Well, that? I saw that online already. Kawai Ola is online now at kawaiola.news with bonus features like video, photo albums, and 40 years of stories on our Lahui.
Wow.
You never know. Get with the times, boy.
There will be luau again soon, and family gatherings. There will be hula festivals, sporting events, and concerts. To help our communities when they come back together, respond to the 2020 census now. Spend a few minutes online today to impact the next 10 years of healthcare, infrastructure, and education. Go to 2020census.gov and respond today to make Hawaii's tomorrow brighter. It's time to shape our future. Paid for by U.S. Census Bureau.
Heard you have a new process of voting this year.
I don't vote, bro.
It's so easy. All you gotta do is register by July 9th, get a ballot in the mail, fill them out, send them back. No lines, no poll stations, just you and your kuleana.
The only kuleana I have is become the next big MMA fight.
You think that's kuleana?
McFarland.
Quote, it's our kuleana, our right and responsibility. Before you represent Hawaii in the cage, make sure you represent your people with your ballot.
They are the heroes, the helpers, working on the front lines. And here's one small way that you can help them in return. Complete your 2020 census today. 2020 census data helps our community plan funding for hospitals, clinics, and emergency services across Hawaii. An accurate count helps public health officials know who is at risk, and first responders identify the resources they need to protect our communities. Complete your census at 2020census.gov and help shape our future. Paid for by U.S. Census Bureau.
E kalahuie, mahalo for joining us on this episode of Ola Ka Hāloa. To find any other resources that you heard about in this broadcast tonight, please go to www.oha.org. Be well, malamopono, ahuiho.